So I've got a browser window open. We're going to go ahead and sign up for our free Azure account. So we'll go out to azure.microsoft.com. And once you're here, go ahead and click Try Azure for free. And then we're going to do the Start Free option. If you haven't already created an account, go ahead and create one by selecting that link. They're going to ask you first name, last name, some general information, your address, and then I'm about to show you the credit card portion uh, where they said that it's needed for verification. I'm not sure why they do that for a free account, but I've never been charged. Go ahead and select I agree to the customer agreement. I'm going to leave this one unchecked. And then once you click next on this part, it's going to go to the identity verification by card. I'll go ahead and pause the video here, get that completed, and then come back after you've successfully signed up for your account. You'll get this page. Go ahead and click on Go to Azure Portal. You can complete the checklist. I'm going to skip this and click on Microsoft Azure at the top. The service that we're interested in is SQL databases. So go ahead and click that. And then we'll go ahead and click Create SQL Database. And you'll notice here, you get this prompt. This didn't show the first time I brought this up. You may have to wait a few minutes after you set up your account, but it did eventually show. This was released yesterday on the 27th of September. So it may be a lot of people that's signing up for it, or just takes a bit to show. So if you don't see it the first time, wait 5 minutes and then try to create your SQL database again. But essentially says, want to try Azure SQL Database for free, create a free serverless database with the first 100,000 vCore seconds, 32 gigs of data, and then 32 gigs of backup storage free per month for the lifetime of the subscription. So no time limit on this. One thing that to note is the 100,000 vCore seconds. And once you hit that limit, the database may shut down. But I wouldn't use this for production workload. It's just so that you can become familiar with Azure SQL Database. So let's go ahead and click on Apply Offer. And it says free database offer applied. You got first 100,000 vCore seconds and 32 gigs of data and 32 gigs of backup storage. That's awesome. Go ahead and create our resource group. If you're new to Azure, the resource group is a collection of resources that share the same lifecycle, permissions, and policies. Go ahead and create a new one. And here we're going to give our database a name. I'm just going to call mine Test. And then we don't currently have a server, so go ahead and click Create New. Enter a server name. This is the name that you will use to connect to this database. So it does have to be unique across all of Azure. Let's see if AutomateSQL is taken. It is not. It's available. So select your location. At the time of this video, this is available in the East US, West Central US, and UK South locations. I'm just going to go with East US because that's the closest one to me. Authentication method. So Microsoft Entra only authentication. So that's if you're familiar with Azure Active Directory, that's what that is, or use both SQL and Microsoft Entra authentication. I'm going to choose that options just so that I can use a SQL authenticated account whenever I'm connecting to my test database. You do need to set up a server admin login if you do that. So I'm just going to give it a password and then click OK. You also have to do the intra admin, and that's just going to be myself. So you can either just search for your name here, or you can select it from this group or from this list and click next. Networking. Let's see. That's next. So this is the using a general purpose serverless. So we've got 2 vCores. You can adjust that if you want to go down, then it should give you additional time with the server being up. If you went to 1 vCore, let's see what yeah. So you can reduce that, and you can go all the way up to 4 vCores, but there again, it's going to impact how long the server stays up in a month. So if you use essentially all of your credits um, in the first few days with 4 vCores, then you'll have to wait until the next month before it gets re-enabled again. So I'm just going to stick with the default of max vCores of 2, and then it's actually going to go all the way down to half a core. So if it's not doing anything, or if it's got a light load, then Azure can modify the based on the compute load, modify how many cores is being used. So I am going to leave auto pause enabled so that if the free offer limit is reached, the database will not be accessible until the beginning of the next calendar month when free amount is renewed. So that's what I was talking about, the different vCores. The more vCores that you can use, the faster that you can run through those credits. And that's perfectly fine for a test environment or a development environment even. But if it's production, you're thinking that you're going to use this for production, it would be bad if your database went offline mid-month. So data max size is 32 gig, and this option is grayed out because we're using the free version. So let's go ahead and click apply to these settings, and then click networking. Connectivity method. So if you leave it with no access, you won't be able to access it. You would be able to adjust that later, but we're going to do a public input point. For this case, public input endpoint is fine, but if it was a production Azure SQL database, you'd want to put some security around that and lock it down further. Firewall rules, we're going to allow services and resources to access this server. I'm going to go ahead and click yes for that. And then I'm also going to add my current client IP address. So that's going to allow me the ability to connect to this database once it's built. Connection policy, we're just going to leave that with the defaults. And then we're going to leave TLS version with 1.2 as well. Go ahead and click next. I'm not worried about the Microsoft Defender for SQL on this one. Everything looks good here. Click next again. We're going to go with the default collation. And here's very important data source. I'm going to use a sample database, and it's going to use this AdventureworksLT. So once it's complete, we'll be able to write a few queries and take a look at the data that's inside that sample database. And it also gives you a starting point if you're completely new with Azure SQL DB on how to connect and then begin querying it. Go ahead and click next on your tags. We're not going to put any tags here, but this is another way that you can keep up with your different resources in Azure. And then review and create. So we're going to review it. So we're going to use this is our subscription resource group, our region. Database name is just called test. This is our new server. Our server admin, that's if it's SQL authenticated, that's our admin. And then also, this is an admin account if I just use Microsoft Entra authentication. We're using a standard series, Gen 5, 2V cores, 32 gigs of storage. Not worried about zone redundancy. Overage billing is disabled. And then our network settings, and then our identities. Not enabled. Transparent data encryption, TDE. We're not too concerned with that. Just know that you can encrypt data at rest if you were using Azure SQL Database in a production use case. And go ahead and click create. The deployment will take a few minutes. You can also see if you navigate away from this page, you can also get back to the status here. And then click on deployment in progress. And you can see that it's still running. All right, our deployment is complete. Let's take a look at the resource. So I'm going to go back to the main page in the portal at portable.azure.com just so that you can see your resources show up under recent. If they don't show here, you can go back to either SQL databases here and get back to the resource. And go ahead and click on your server. Some important information here. You can see your resource group. You can see your server name, connection strings, which we'll talk about in just a second. Your pricing tier with free overage billing. So Microsoft won't charge you if you do go over your vCore limit. It'll basically just turn off your server until the next month. And then 0 vCore seconds remaining. Let's see what that means. So I'm not sure about that's new with this free pricing tier. So we'll take a look at that in a second. More information here. You can go ahead and just click this to get more space on your screen. But we're going to look at connection strings. So if you had an application you wanted to connect to this database, you could use these different connection strings. I don't have an application to connect, so we're going to download Azure Data Studio. And this application runs on Mac OS, runs on Windows and Linux. You can also, if you're on a Windows, platform, you can use SQL Server Management Studio, which is what I typically use if I'm managing on-premises SQL servers, or sometimes I'll use it for the Azure SQL DB as well. Uh, but so go ahead and just search for Azure Data Studio, and then it's going to be download and install. We're on Windows, so we're going to choose the Windows installer. Once it downloads, go ahead and go through the installation. And once it finishes, go ahead and make sure this is selected to launch Azure Data Studio and click Finish. All right, we'll go ahead and make this full screen. The first thing I do is go over here to Connections, and we're going to add a new connection. Connection type should be Microsoft SQL Server. We're just going to use the parameters input type. You can do a connection string, but I usually always just use parameters. Our server name, so let's go grab that. That is back in the portal. And that's right here is our server name. Go ahead and click this, and it will copy it to your clipboard, and just paste that here. I am going to use, instead of the SQL login, you can use either SQL login or Azure Active Directory. That's the one I'm going to use, is Azure Active Directory. Go ahead and add an account. This is the same account that you use to set up your Azure account. Go ahead and provide your password. And then once this authenticates, you can close the browser out. All right, so it says your account was added successfully. Go ahead and close the browser, and then come back to Azure Data Studio, and you should see the account listed here now. And then for our database, we're going to select test. Everyone will have a master database, but choose the one that you created. Encrypt mandatory is true, leave that as that. And then the server group, you can create a server group if you had multiple connections that you wanted to group over here, but we're just going to leave that default name. I'm just going to click connect, and you should get this on your page. And since we used sample data from the AdventureworksLT database, you should already have a list of tables in here. And then also over here is your connection, so you can see all of the tables in this database, the views, any stored procedures or functions. So everything looks good there. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new query window by right-clicking on server name and selecting new query. And then I'm just going to do a select top one star. Usually I don't like to use star, but we're going to use it in this case because I don't know the structure of this database. I just want to see the columns essentially of this build version table. And then you can either hit F5 or come up here and select run, so we can see that we're getting back data. All right, so I'm just going to write out a query here. We're going to select all of the columns from the sales lt.address table, and I'll put a few of these select statements in. I'll attach them to the blog post so that you can download them if you want to get started just with this database. So you can see it's got quite a bit of information. We've got 450 rows in that table. And I'm sure there's a few stored procedures that you can look at and run if you wanted to and execute. But I'll put a few more of queries inside the zip file, and you all can download those from the blog post. So there you have it. You have your free Azure SQL database set up where you can, if you don't want to go with the sample database, you can delete this one and create your own. So back in the portal, if you wanted to delete the sample database, you can delete it here, or you can just start with your own database, your own empty database if you already know what you want to get started with. So I hope this was helpful. Again, just check out the blog post. I'll have a few other queries in there if you're not familiar with SQL. That'll get you started just playing around with this sample data. Thanks for watching.